Today, we're going to travel back about 10,600 years ago to Britain. Now, Britain is it's basically an island that is just north of Europe, right above Paris, Belgium, Amsterdam, and it is isolated for the most part from the rest of Europe, but it has not always been that way. In the past, the landmass that's now called Britain was actually attached to the rest of the continent by a piece of land called the Doggerland landmass. And that remained there until about 8,000 years ago. You'll learn about what happened to that landmass and how Britain became separated from Europe a little bit later. But now let's talk about the first British civilization, or the first British people. Now, a skeletal fossil was discovered in Gough's Cave in Cheddar Gorge, Somerset, England, in 1903. That fossil was excavated and studied. Now, it was named Cheddar Man, and it is Britain's oldest near-complete human skeleton. The skeletal remains date to the Mesolithic period. It dates somewhere between 8,470 to 8,230 BC. That makes it over 10,000 years old, somewhere about 10,600 years old if you want to get a little more exact. Now, the skeletal remains are of a young man, and it appears that he died a violent death. As you will note, one of the pictures of his skull later in this video has a large gash just along the front across the nose, and it appeared that he had an infection in the brain as well. Now, this young man was likely in his early 20s, and he stood at about 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighed around 146 pounds. He was a member of a population of nomadic hunters. Now, the remains of people from this nomadic group have been found in Spain, Luxembourg, and Hungary. And they know this because of DNA samples that connect the people. Now, the Natural History Museum in 2018 took nuclear DNA samples from the petrous part of the temporal bone of the skull, and they were able to extract a full genome from this DNA sample. It was assumed from, the DNA, they were expecting and assuming that Cheddar Man had pale skin and fair hair, but that turned out to not be true. In fact, what they did learn is that his DNA strongly suggests he had blue eyes, a very dark brown to black complexion, and dark curly hair. This suggests, along with some other studies and research that they've done, they're kind of concluding that the genes for pale skin became common in European populations much later than they believed. Now, the DNA also revealed that Cheddar Man's ancestors left Africa and moved into what is now called the Middle East today. And then later, they headed into Europe and went west, crossing the ancient land bridge, the Doggerland, which we talked about earlier, which connected Britain to the main European continent. Now, ancient settlers came and went out of Britain over this Doggerland land bridge over, many years, over a few thousand years, until the last glacial period, which was about 11,700 years ago. Now, as Europe warmed up, ice caps melted and sea levels rose. So at about 8,000 years ago, the Doggerland Bridge was covered by water and disappeared. So now Britain, it has become an island, and the people who were on that piece of land at that time now became isolated from the rest of Europe. And so they became the first Brits. But the biggest question now is, how did Brits become pale skinned or white? And there are a few different theories floating around, some more popular than others. But it is believed that pale skin appeared in Britain about 6,000 years ago. Now, the different theories that they have, I'm not going to go into those because I'm not so sure that I agree with them. Um, what makes me an authority on, whether genetic information that leads to how pale skin came about, what's true, what's not, I don't claim to be an expert, but I do take knowledge that I have from having a degree in microbiology and working in DNA, working with DNA for quite a little while. I'll take that knowledge and apply it here to some of the theories that I've looked at and just say that I'm not so sure I agree with them. But what I did find in studying not just this, but some other things that I've studied that you'll see in other videos, that this 6,000 years ago number will pop up again. So I am going to kind of conclude with them that pale skin appeared about 6,000 years ago on this planet. I really find this fascinating because this is an area that I worked in, genetic analysis, DNA research, and the scientists studied the portion of the genetic information, the portion of the DNA that gives us our eye color, skin color, hair color. And that is how they determined what the possible physical appearance of Cheddar Man would be. And I just find it so fascinating. I also think it's really great that they were able to find an almost near complete skeleton of this ancient man. And even more amazing was that they were able to still find viable genetic material that they were able to utilize to do DNA extraction and DNA transcription to obtain the information about his appearance. And, history is just so interesting, and the answers are just never what you really expect them to be. But anyway, let's get back to the story. So, after Britain became separated from Europe, the nomadic people that were on that island, who were gatherers and hunters, kind of slowly transformed their existence because of their situation. And so they went from hunter-gatherers to farmers and settlers, and thereby forming Britain's first civilizations. And it has been noted through genetic studies, from DNA samples from a large portion of the British population and Cheddar Man. And they found that about 10% of the genes within today's British population, 10% of an individual's genes in the British population today comes from this early nomadic group of people. So I find that to be an interesting piece of fact that a large number of Britons, 10% of their genetic information is traced back to this specific nomadic group of people. So they truly are Britain's first people and the originators of their first civilization. I hope you guys found this information informative, helpful, and interesting as I did. I really just think that this is funny because I know what some people out there are going to think and say, but You know, these are the facts as they are today. Britain's first people were black. I did note when studying this that the scientists mentioned that they received backlash, a little bit of backlash for their findings, and they did try to backtrack a little, saying, well, maybe he could be white, but our findings keep giving us these results, and for now, this is all we have. So for some, science is about feelings and not facts. I want to thank you guys for watching today. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you soon.